Yes, it's on. Yeah. All right. Can we get going? All right. So weird with the mic. Testing. 1, 2, 3. A little bit better. Okay. All right. We'll get started. I don't think this is going to be a long seminar, but thanks everyone able to join. And hopefully you get something out of this. So this isn't based on any kind of like Christian-based personal finance seminar. It's just what I myself, just from, personal investing and just work. I work kind of tangentially in finance, so just some of the things I found useful to know, and I think it's good for everyone to know, both as as Christians that living in this world. It's good to know a little bit about personal finance and stuff like that. So some of these things I wish I knew about years ago, but it's obviously never too late to learn a little bit. I'm not an expert by any means. If you guys have any questions, more than happy to take questions and stuff. But hopefully, you guys get something out of this this seminar. All right, next slide. Thank you. All right, so the objective of this presentation or seminar. So this seminar, I'm not going to be talking about how to save money, which is kind of like budgeting. So I'm personally not very good about budgeting and stuff like that. So there are probably other courses or other presentations or people you could talk to about saving money, but this is more about what to do with your money once you have like savings. So once you start earning income and saving money, what you should do or think about, what you can do or should do with money that you have, savings after you get your paycheck and pay the bills and things like that. So, and this is going to be based upon your short and longer term financial goals, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Okay, next slide. Okay, so just some overall biblical principles. Why do we want to think about personal finance? Besides, that's an everyday fact of life in this world. So, obviously, the Bible commands us to have good stewardship over what God has given us. So, a couple of chapters that talk about that in Luke and Matthew. So, part of what God has given us is obviously, our finances, our personal finances. So we want to be good stewards over that. Obviously, we're also called to help those in our immediate care. So that could be, our immediate family or friends and stuff like that. So obviously, taking care of your own personal finances is going to help you help others, and the flip side, not necessarily be a burden, to others financially as well. And obviously, if you're a good steward with your money and are able to, generate, or do well with it, it's going to further your ability to be generous, donate, and support ministries. So obviously, a lot of places in the Bibles that talk about that. Whoops. All right. So, okay, next slide. All right. So, reasons why it's important to invest your money or your savings. So versus, someone could say, well, why don't I just, I'm just going to keep my money in my bank account, not think about it, not worry about it. What's the big deal? Why should I even, why do I have to think about, these alternative investment vehicles or things like that? So we all know, or it's definitely been more and more news about, inflation. So, every year, inflation pretty much takes away your money, right? So if I have $100 in my bank account, next year, even if I still have $100, it's going to be able to buy less the following year, right? We all understand that prices are going up, things are getting much more expensive, especially recently. So historically, it's been around 2 to 3% per year. That's kind of a historical average. So every year, in theory, your money is worth 2% less. And then these last couple years, it's been like much higher than that. It's been around like 4 or 5, maybe even higher and stuff like that. So if you're not doing anything with your money, if you're just letting it sit there, you're essentially losing money by just letting it just sit in your bank account, do nothing. Hopefully that makes sense, right? And there's also an opportunity cost, right? There's easy opportunities for you to put your money somewhere and earn a return or earn some kind of interest for it. So if you don't put it in something that can generate some kind of interest, then you're kind of incurring what in economics we call like an opportunity cost, right? You're losing out on money by not doing anything about it. So you're kind of incurring this kind of cost. So that's another reason why you want to think about and do something with your savings, with your money. Okay, next slide. All right, so first kind of concept we want to talk about is compound interest. And to do this, I want to hopefully make it a little bit interactive. So let's say, first example, if you had $1,000 and I just put it in, let's say, the stock market, and the stock market usually averages 10% per year. So I buy, like, say, $1,000 in stocks, and it goes up 10% every year. Over the next 10 years, how much would I have at the end of 10 years? How much would my stocks would be worth? Is it $1,500? Is it $2,500? Is it $5,000? Adrian says $2,500. Anyone says anything else? $2,500? All right, click once, Dennis. All right, $2,500. All right, good job, Adrian. No prize for you. So something that's worth $1,000 today, if I put it in theoretically, the stock market, and it generates 10% per year, in 10 years it's going to be worth 2.5 times the amount, right? So this is the idea of like earning interest, but it compounds over time, right? So it's more than twice. It's not just 1,000, 2,000, but you're earning interest on top of the gains every single year, right? So that's the importance of making sure you're earning something, and you want to be earning kind of over time is the best way to kind of describe it, if that makes sense. We'll go through like a little bit, a chart that will show this hopefully better. But all right, second example here. So I have the same thing. So the same $1,000 I put in the stock market, same 10% annual return, but now it's twice as long. So 20 years. Instead of 10 years, it's 20 years. How much will that be at the end of 1,000? So 3,000, 5,000, or 7,000? All right, click one more time. All right, so it's about 7,000. Actually, it's a little less than 7,000. It's like 6,800. I'm just rounding it up to 7,000. Okay, so this is the idea that, right, so that's this example, like more time is usually better, right? So even though it's twice as long, right, 10 to 20 years, it's more than twice as big, right? It's not 2,500 to 5,000. Thanks, Paul, for trying. But it's more than that, huh? You rounded it, okay. So it's actually like 2.5 times, right? So it's actually grows faster than that. So next slide. So the longer you let it grow, the better. So it's always better to start earlier than late. So this shows this example. So the same $1,000, this is how much that would be over time. This goes out from starting the beginning to like 30 years out. So you can see kind of the shape of the graph is exponential, right? So it's not linear, it's exponential. So it's going to grow like faster. So the earlier you start, the better, right? So this is what like any personal like finance person will tell you. It's always, when's the best time to start investing? The answer is yesterday, So it's true. So it's always better to start earlier, than later. And some people will be like, well, the market's too high or too low, I want to wait, but most experts will say, don't wait, just, start, because then you can start gaining the compound interest like earlier. Okay. Does that make sense? So this is why it's important to, one of the big reasons why it's important to invest your savings is to start, now if you're younger, or if you haven't started something, then it's better to start something earlier than later, right? Okay, next slide. Okay, where should I put my money? Okay, so we'll go through different options. We'll talk about it. So, everyone asks like, where should I put my money? Okay, so we all agree that, okay, I should do something with my money. I shouldn't just leave it, in a checking account or under the bed or whatnot. So where should I put my money? So this kind of shows, different, depending on your financial goals and your need for money. This kind of goes from like short term to long term. Is kind of the best way, I think it's to think about it. So short term is like things you have to worry about like today, tomorrow, very soon, right? So everyday bills, you got to pay your credit card, you got to pay your groceries, you got to pay, the rent. So these things you have to pay right away. Emergency fund, maybe not something you need like today or tomorrow, but you may need it somewhat in the near future, right? Or you just want to, you want to set aside some money just in case something bad happens, car needs repairs, someone gets sick, someone needs money, so on and so forth. Then we have kind of more medium to longer term, again, just kind of depending where you are, your situation, your personal situation, family situation. So you may be thinking, okay, I want to save for like a house or a car eventually. So that's, not immediate soon, but it may be, somewhere in the medium-term future, let's say. And then for those of us with kids, you're thinking about like college, longer out. So it's something like longer term. So that's not super near, but, something to think about. And then longer term, again, depending where you're at, retirement is something, much further out, but, something you want to think about. So depending kind of where you are, like in terms of your financial like goals, and that's obviously something that you have to think about or talk to your spouse or your family about and stuff like that, but you kind of have to decide, okay, what am I prioritizing? What should I think about? If you still have like questions about that type of topics, usually there's a lot of like personal advisors you can talk to or other information, but this is at least when you have to think about, okay, where should I put my money? Like, what are my goals for kind of the near to the future? So, all right, next slide. So depending on your goals, like, all right, I want to save for a house, or I want to save more for retirement or for college. Well, there's different kind of investment vehicles for each one of these, and we'll go through these in more detail. So, but for things like your everyday bills, you obviously have your checking account. For longer term things, for like college, you have 529 plans. For your retirement, you have your 401ks and your IRAs and things of that nature. Next slide. So depending on where you put these things, these earn different types of interest. So these are kind of typical. These are not necessarily set in stone, but usually the shorter term stuff earns less of a return than the longer term stuff. Okay, so the 10%, like I mentioned earlier, that's kind of the historical stock market exchange. So those are usually things you think about for like longer term, like retirement kind of stuff. For your everyday bill stuff, usually you just have that in a checking account, right? But checking accounts don't usually earn very much. And then, things in the middle earn kind of like somewhere kind of in between. So depending on where you're putting your money, there's different options. And usually the things that you need more earlier usually earns less of a return than things that you can wait till longer, which works out, right? Because we saw that the longer you put something in there, right, it's going to grow like faster. So the more that you can put toward like college or kids' college or retirement, that's going to earn a higher return and it's going to grow. But it's still important, if you have money you need for like shorter term stuff, to try to still earn some kind of return. Otherwise, you put everything else. If you only do retirement and checking, then there's a lot of things in the middle you could be possibly, missing out on. Okay. All right, next slide. Okay, so unfortunately we have to talk about taxes. So taxes is a fact of life. The majority of the time, you'll have to pay taxes on interest and gains on your savings investments. So even if you earn 10% every year, eventually you're going to have to pay taxes on that 10%. So that's unfortunately a fact of life. We have to pay taxes. But however, there are ways or options to decrease or even eliminate how much taxes you pay. Okay, there are some options that are tax-free. You don't have to pay any taxes on it. There are not many of those, but you obviously want to take advantage of those, right? Because it's better to invest in something that's tax-free versus something that you have to pay taxes, right? Because that's going to eat into your returns eventually. There are some options that are tax deductible, so you can deduct it from your taxes. So meaning that if you owe taxes, you will owe less, or if you get a return, you can get more in your return, right? So that's basically getting more of your money back from doing taxes. So tax deductible, you want to take advantage of those things as much as possible as well. And there's tax deferred, so you don't pay taxes now, but you'll pay taxes eventually in the future. So why is that better? Well, it's usually better because you have some control over it if it is tax deferred. For example, your taxes obviously depend on which tax bracket you're in. So if you wait till longer, usually you may have some more control over your tax bracket versus today your tax bracket is going to be driven mostly about your income. But if we're talking about like in the future when you're retired, you don't have an income. Your money is just maybe from your investment. So you could be theoretically in a lower tax bracket, so you don't have to pay as much taxes. Or there's some states that don't have state income tax. So if you want, or if you have the option to, you can move to a state that has no state income tax. So, yeah, I'm serious. Or, what's that? After you retire, right, exactly, right. Or don't move to a state that has high income taxes, kind of the opposite way. So some options are, I think, Texas, right, Florida, Tennessee, oh yeah? Texas, yeah. Washington State. I don't know about that. Really? Nevada is one, so yeah, Nevada, so. Anyway, so that's another way, so it's tax deferred. You can kind of control how much taxes you make, okay? Or taxes you have to pay eventually. All right, next slide. Okay, so we'll go through each of those options that we talked about earlier in that one slide. So first one is checking account. Everyone knows what checking accounts are. You know, your checking accounts are your bank. You pay your bills through your checking account. Usually it earns little to no interest. Sometimes can earn interest if you keep a minimum, but there are probably better options to put your money. So if there's like if you have a checking account, it's like if you have like $5,000, they'll give you like 0.5%. You're probably better putting that $5,000 in something else instead of leaving it in there. So ideally, you shouldn't have too much in your checking account since it doesn't earn interest in general. So that's one thing to consider or kind of take away. Is like, well, if I have a lot of money in my checking account and I really usually don't need that much, maybe I should put some money somewhere else instead. Different option. Okay, next slide. Okay. Savings, sometimes they're called high yield savings accounts. Some banks call it money market accounts. So these usually earn interest. So usually anywhere between like 2 to 4%. The nice thing is you can easily transfer money to checking or other accounts usually within a few business days. So you have money that you don't need it for everyday spending or bills or something like that. You can just transfer whatever at the end of the month, move into a high yields savings account. And the nice thing is like these days it's so easy to create these and set these up online. So some other options that we've used or are aware of is like Discover Bank, Capital One Bank, American Express, CIT Bank. So it's really easy to create these accounts online and link it to your checking account and just kind of like move things in and out. And right now, high yield savings accounts are pretty good rates right now. It's like 4 to 5% right now, which is typically is not usually that high. So if you have money in your checking account that's just sitting there, you could move it to a high yield savings account and earn like 4 to 5%, And then if you do need it for like bills, stuff like that, you can always transfer it and move it back and forth. The cons is that the interest rate is not fixed and can change. So it may be 4 to 5% today, but later this year or next year or whatnot, they could change their rates. So these rates are not like set in stone or anything like that. And you may have different banks. They're trying to it's like a business, right? They're trying to generate business. So one bank may have a better rate than another one. So you may have to like shop around, if you want to get the best rate, or you're just happy with the account that it's in right now. You can just leave it in there. Okay, next slide. Okay, CDs. I'm not sure if most of you have heard of CDs. So CDs stand for Certificate of Deposit. It's offered by most banks. You specify specific amounts for a certain amount of time that you want to put in one of these CDs. They usually go anywhere from 1 month to even longer, 5 years, or somewhere in between. So the interest rate depends on the length of the time period and sometimes the amount. Usually that's more than like a savings account. So typically like savings accounts are around 2 to 3. CDs usually around 3 to 5%. Right now CDs and savings accounts are about the same right now, so I wouldn't necessarily advocate strongly for CDs, but there's reasons why you may want to do CDs. And then the cons is that once you enter the CD, then you can't take your money out before the expiration date. So you're pretty much locking, you're kind of in agreement with the bank that you're going to leave your money in that CD till whatever that length of time is, whether it's 1 month or 6 months or 12 months. So you can't, it's not like a savings account where you can take the money out and pay bills and put it back in. Right, you gotta lock it and set it in there for the length of time. So that's the cons. The other con is usually you have to at the end of the time period, some banks will just automatically renew it at the same length of term, which maybe you actually don't want. Maybe you want that money back, or you want to invest it in something else. So you just have to keep track of that amount as the CD expires. If that makes sense. Next slide, yep. So now we're going toward like longer term stuff. So 529s are college savings plans. So these are helpful for parents who are saving, save money for their kids' tuition. So each state usually has their own sponsor plans to help save money for college and can be used for college in any state. So if you start a 529 using the Illinois 529, you don't have to go, your kid doesn't have to go to a school in Illinois. You can go anywhere. And technically, you can start these before you even have kids. So you can open one up in your own social security number, and you can transfer it to any family member later. So if you want to start saving kids now, before you have kids, you're more than, that's an option as well. Can be transferred to other family members. So even if your kid, for some reason, doesn't end up going to college, you can transfer it to a sibling or another family member, or they can keep it in their name and they can pass it on to their kids. So it's not, just because you put the money in there, it can be used for other family members as well. So some of the pros here, if you open a plan in the state you live, so Illinois, so if you open the Illinois 529, you can deduct up to $10,000 or $20,000 for married couple per year for your state income tax. So that's money you get back from the state for using the Illinois 529. So that's good for that. If used for college tuition expenses, any of the gain is tax-free. So if your 529s grows and you use that money for their tuition or expenses, so it can be like books, computers, things of that nature, then you don't have to pay taxes on the gain for that 520 for those investments, which is good. You can also withdraw penalty-free if your child gets a scholarship. So if they're an awesome athlete and get a full ride, you can actually take that money back out of the 529 and stuff. So the cons is you can't use it for other purposes without penalty. So the intent is to use it for college or secondary school. So it can also be used for med school, graduate school, any kind of educational endeavor. So, but you can't use it outside of that without a penalty. Yes? So it depends. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it depends what you put it in. Usually it's around, like, the plans usually will ask, like, when do you think your kid's going to go to college? And you put whatever, 20, 30. So they'll usually put it in they'll put it in an appropriate investment vehicle for you automatically, which is nice. So if it's further out, it'll get like a higher return, like around, I don't know, 8 or 9 or 10%. As they get closer to that, they're going to college, then they'll put it in like CDs or bonds, which are usually a much lower rate of return. That makes sense. There's no taxes on the gains, right? Yeah. So you put in $1,000 and it grows to $10,000. Yeah, and you use that money for Wyatt or Emmett's tuition. You don't have to pay taxes on the gain. Right. Is it disadvantage? That I don't know much about, to be honest with you. Yeah. Less than, yeah. That's possible. I personally don't know, so you may have to think about or weigh the pros and cons. So Jason, you had a question? Uh-huh. That's a good question. I'm sure there's ways to transfer it. Yeah, I can look into that a little bit more. Okay, Michael. I think it's easier to do it for each child because there's limits. So if you have like generous family members, or even yourself, there's technically a limit of how much you can give each child until you hit what's called the gift tax. So you can give each of your children, it doesn't have to be a 529, it can be anything. You can give them up to $18,000 per year, tax-free. So if you did it all in one, then it will only be $18,000 total. If you have 3 different accounts, and in theory, you could give them, whatever that math is, 56,000. Or you have generous parents, and they want to give, they can give 18,000 to each child without incurring the gift tax. Over 18,000, then they're going to theoretically anything above 18,000 theoretically is subject to the gift tax. So it's, in my mind, it's just easier to stay under 18,000. So one other thing you can do is if you have generous parents, they give you money, it's like, oh, this money is for your child, you just put it in the 529 and you deduct it from your state income taxes, even though it isn't your money, so a win-win. Okay, that makes sense? Any questions, 520s? Okay, next slide. Okay, 501ks, depending on your type of workplace, sometimes they're called 403bs. I'm sure there's other ones, but these are, I think, the most common ones. So these are employee-sponsored retirement plans. So these are, you tell your employer, usually as a percentage, how much of your paycheck to take out before taxes. And many employers will match up to a certain amount. So if you say, I'm going to take out 10% of my paycheck and put into these 401ks, the employee will actually match up to a certain percentage. And every employee is different, but it's one of the benefits that a lot of workplaces will give to doing these kind of plans and stuff like that. So the pros are, it's usually done before taxes, so it doesn't impact your take-home pay as much. If your employer does match, that's pretty much free money. So they're giving, this free money given to you, so that's good. Tax deferred, so we talked about the advantages of tax deferment earlier. So all the gains are tax deferred until you're ready to take them out of retirement. And usually invested in the markets for higher gains. So again, for most of these, they ask you when you think you're going to retire. So you put whatever, 2040, 2050. So usually they'll automatically put it in like longer yielding investments and things like that. Okay. The cons is that the max you can put in is $23,000 per year. So this is before the match. So you can only put in $23,000 of your own money or from their paycheck into these accounts. You can't take out money before 59 and a half years old without a penalty. So you're pretty much, that money is locked in there until that time, unless you want to take it out and then you're going to have hit by penalties. And then you have to start taking out a minimum by age 72. So at that point, you have to start taking. I don't know, and I don't know what the minimums are, to be honest with you, but at that age, you're required to start taking money out of your 401k, even if you want to leave it in there or not. Okay. Any question? Okay. Next slide. Do you put away? You should save for investments. I have a slide that talks about that. Okay. I anticipated you. All right. In addition to 401ks, there are IRAs, which stand for individual retirement accounts. There's two different types. The most in the industry will talk about traditional and Roth IRAs. So these are not through your work. These are you open outside of your work through regular investment companies like Vanguard, Fidelity. They have these options for you. So kind of similar. You put money in, into these accounts, and you let it grow over time for retirement and stuff like that. So the difference between traditional and Roth, traditional, depending on your income bracket, is tax deductible, so you get more money up front. Versus Roth, the gains are tax-free. So if you do a Roth IRA, any of the gains are fully tax-free, which is nice. You don't have to worry about paying taxes later. And again, usually invested in the market for higher gains. The cons is the max that you can put in is $7K per year, or $8K if you're over 50. So that's per individual. So for married couples, you can put in $14,000 per year, or more if you're over 50. So that's the max you can put in. Again, same rules for 401ks. You can't take out money before 59 and a half. And after 72, you have to start taking money out of those. So these are additional options to invest for your retirement or put money away for your retirement. In addition to your 401ks, maybe your company doesn't have one, or you want to invest, you want to save more for retirement and things like that. Okay? Yes, Paul? No tax. No. Yes. No tax. Well, technically, yeah, it's post-tax. It's money you took out. It's money from your account, so it's already been taxed. Yeah. Versus the traditional, you can deduct it from your taxes and then bump it up. So one, depending on your tax bracket, one may or may not be necessarily better. There's a calculation you can do to kind of determine which one's better for you. So, but Roth is easy. You don't have to think about it. You just do it. In my opinion. Yes, Anna. So I think, some companies will have like Roth 401ks. So I think it's similar in that the Roth one, you don't have to pay taxes like later. So again, it's like one will be kind of tax deferred versus tax free. I think the Roth, they may take it out after the taxes. So it impacts your post-tax a little bit more, if that makes sense. I'll double check on that. So it's kind of similar, like traditional versus Roth. Like traditional, you can deduct it from your taxes, so it's pre-tax dollars, versus the Roth is post-tax dollars. So one impacts your today's paycheck more versus being taxed on it later. Yeah, if that makes sense. Okay, Dennis. So there is income limitations with the Roth, but right now there's a loophole, and we're not talking this is like illegal or anything. This is well known. It's called rollover Roth. All right. So even if technically you're right, people make above a certain amount can't contribute to a Roth IRA directly. So the way you get around it, which every finance person will tell you is what they advocate for their clients. You put money in a traditional IRA, you don't deduct it from your taxes, then they roll it over from a traditional to a Roth IRA. So that's how you can contribute to a Roth IRA even if you make over a certain amount, if that makes sense. Right? Any financial advisor or company can help you set that up. Yeah, you have to do, it's a little bit more you have to do like on your taxes and like paperwork, but it's not like people, a lot of people take advantage of that loophole. And it's possible they may close that loophole, who knows, in the future, but right now that's still available. Okay. All right. Next slide. So one question you may have is why don't I just invest in the stock market all the time? If I have money that I need like a year from now, why don't I just put it in the stock market and earn that higher return versus putting it into like a CD or high yield savings account? Well, the stock market has volatility, so there are some years where the return is lower than 10% or even negative. So this is why the stock market is usually people recommend it for like medium to longer term. Right, so this is the stock returns for the last 30 years, and you can see, so the average is like 10%, right? But you can see that there have been a lot of years where it wasn't 10%, or years that it was even negative. So 2007 was the worst year in the last 30 years, so it was negative 38%. Even just a couple of years ago was negative like 19% stock market. So you could say, well, let me put all my money in the stock market, even money that I need shorter term. You can do that, but there's a risk, right? There's no guarantee that the stock market is going to still get 10% next year. It has on average, so that's why it's better for like longer term investing, because then you can write out the bad years with the really good years. So your average, you're good. But for 1 to 2 years, if you do it in like a CD, you're locking in the rate. You're guaranteed to get what the rate is, which is usually lower, like 4 to 5%, but you're locking it in. So it's a risk versus return kind of proposition. So something to think about. Okay. All right. Next slide. Okay. Talking about debt. So some Christian financial planners or programs will argue that having any debt is bad. I wouldn't say that. So I wouldn't say having debt is necessarily a bad thing. It's kind of a nature of life these days. But understand the impact of borrowing, especially over a longer period of time. So just like what we saw, compound interest, it'll grow over time if you're earning interest. Same thing happens if you have, debt, right? Your debt is someone else, is the bank's investment, basically. Right, so think about it that way. So yours is gonna grow. Your debt will grow exponentially the longer that you have it out there, right? So an example: if you have $300,000 mortgage for 30 years at 5% rate, you'd be paying $1,600 a month, and after 30 years, you would have paid out of your pocket $580,000 total, right? So that $300,000 debt actually costs you $580,000 at the end of the day, after 30 years. Versus if you do it for a shorter period of time, 15 year, you'll have to pay more per month, but you pay less, in the long term, right? Because one is 15 years versus 30 years. So think about that when you're, getting a mortgage or loan for a car or something longer, things like that. So one takeaway is instead of investing at X%, consider paying off debt that's higher than X%, right? So if I have $10,000 laying around, if I could, my option is to earn 4 to 5%, or I could pay off debt that's higher than that, then I should probably think about paying off the debt that's higher than that before saving, right? Kind of makes sense, right? Okay. Next slide. Okay, so I found this chart online, so I thought it was pretty useful. So kind of a priority of where to put like investments or savings and things like that. So number one, having an emergency fund is good because you don't want to be in a place where something bad happens, then you're not able to kind of cover any contingencies or emergencies. So having that is a good idea. Putting that in the savings account, is perfectly fine. Earn some kind of return, and then when you do need it, you can transfer it to your checking account, pay bills pretty easily. Get the maximum match from an employer retirement plan because again, that was free money. So whatever your employer requires for you to get matched, take advantage of that because that's pretty much free money. Pay off high interest debt, credit cards. So again, like we talked about, instead of earning X, pay off. And obviously, I think we all know that credit card debt is the highest yield debt that's pretty much out there. Usually it's double digits and stuff like that. Medium priority, we didn't talk about HSAs. If your company has an HSA, that's a good idea maybe to put some money in there if you think you're going to be using that funds longer term because that's tax-free money. Traditional or Roth IRAs and employer and retirement plans, so maxing out on your retirement plans is the next good idea if you can do so after you've taken care of like the basics, the everyday bills, your emergency fund, then as we talked about, the longer you put your money in for retirement, it'll grow exponentially. And those we saw have usually the highest yield, right? Interest returns 8 to 10%. Then it says pay off medium interest debt, and then lower priority, some additional, like paying off low interest debt or some other taxable accounts. Good. All right, next slide. Okay, so random questions. So theoretically, if someone in this room had asked me, how much should I have saved for retirement? So too bad Paul's not here. But so these are a couple of things I just quickly found, like rules of thumb online. So one common rule of thumb is 10 to 15% of your pre-tax income per year to set aside for retirement. So that's kind of like some advisors just kind of their rule of thumb. According to Fidelity, it's based upon based upon your salary and age. So 1 times your salary by age 30, 3 times by age 40, 6 times by age 50, 8 times by age 60, and 10 times by age 67. This just gives you, again, a rough idea. I don't love it because, your salary is very, I could go to a lower salary job. Am I doing better? No, not necessarily, right? So it kind of depends like when you plan on retiring, depends on how much you plan on spending in retirement. If you think you're going to be a high spender, or maybe you think you're going to not spend as much. But again, I just found this online, so you can think about it or use it, or use it to say like, okay, are we somewhere in at least a general ballpark? All right. What plan or fund should I choose for my 529, 401ks, IRAs? So again, typically when you open these accounts, they'll ask you like, when do you plan on retiring? When is your kid going to go to college? And they automatically allocate and adjust it for you. So it's very nice. So things that are longer term, they're going to put it in things that are going to make a higher rate, but maybe have more volatility. As you get closer to retirement, or your kids graduate or goes to college, they'll move it automatically to lower yield stuff that are more safer. So that risk versus reward return. After you do your IRAs, your 401ks, you may like, I just want to put some money in the market just for additional savings or whatnot. What do I want to invest? So what stock should I pick? So I don't have any great stock picks or recommendations or things like that. I'm sure you can find whoever online that's going to be recommending whatever stocks. I'm a big fan. I think most people who are pretty just conservative, investing in ETFs, electronically traded funds. So these are, they're like a stock where you can track it like a stock. You can buy it on you can buy it from a trading platform like a stock, and these are indexed to the market. If you want to know more, happy to answer any questions. But some very popular ones are, things like VOO or VTV. So as the market goes up, these automatically gain value. So instead of picking a specific stock because that company may or may not do well, instead these ETFs have as the market goes up, it goes up. So you're not subject to if one company does bad, right? But if you want to invest in your favorite company for fun, that's fine as well. All right, next slide. Oh, sorry, yes. For your, just in addition, yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. Yeah, I don't have any strong feelings one way or another about mutual funds. I mean, they're the same. I mean, that's what ETFs are like, right? Old days, before they had ETFs, you had to go to Vanguard and open a mutual fund and find a fund that kind of met your profile or what you liked, and you create an account. I think the ETFs are easy because you can just buy it and sell it. You know, they're much easier to like manage than the old school mutual funds and stuff like that. But I mean, mutual funds do the same thing, right? A mutual fund was, you know, the portfolio manager picking the stocks that fit the prospectus for the fund, right? So instead of doing that, you can just get it. And I think, not 100%, but I think ETFs may have lower fees. Sometimes, maybe. So usually their returns may be a little bit better because the mutual funds have to pay. Well, not all of them. I wouldn't say that, but I think in general, ETFs usually, on average, have less fees than regular mutual funds. Okay? Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Hopefully, you guys got something out of this, a little bit out of this. Okay. If you have any questions, you know, feel free to ask. If there's other topics you guys think will be of interest to you guys, let me know, and then we can try to maybe put something together. So I think obviously it's important as believers who live, you know, in the real world today. You know, we have to be aware of these options and think about, you know, money is something, you know, it's not our master, but we do have to think about it, you know, in this day and age. So again, I talked about the biblical principles of being good stewards, and gives you, you know, more financial flexibility, you know, to help others, not be a burden to others, give something to your, you know, your kids and things like that. Okay. All right, great. Thank you, everyone.